evening, chaps. Good evening, the world. Or Bună seara, as they say in Romanian. And there's a reason that I'm saying that, you see, because Romania has joined the party, country number 49, who's joined the worldwide revolution that is Tallboy Radio. And we're now on episode 129. So as we were chatting just prior to starting to record, we'll be catching up Tiddy and Shiners shortly. The way that we're going, come on, boys, you've got to sort your out and get some more recordings. But before I delve and dive into what we're going to be talking about today, for those of you that haven't recognised me, it's Gaz. I'm leading tonight's episode. Feels like it's been a while. We've got the two regular co-hosts with us. No guest tonight, so should be good fun with just the regular three of us. So, lads, if you want to introduce yourselves, introduce what you're drinking, and any shout-outs that you've got.
Do you want me to go first, Andy?
Yeah, you go first, Dad.
Cool. Right, the beer I'm drinking tonight is from a restaurant which ain't so far away from us. It's one that is Andy's second home, and it is the Hickory's Pale Ale in the takeaway can. And I am not drinking out of a Tallboy Radio glass just for a change. I am drinking it out of this little beauty, which is a Hickory's glass. I picked this up, I think, from the one in Poynter when me and Andy went a couple of months ago now. And when that beer goes, just recently I've been having some bloody awful beers at the end of the podcast and trying them out. Well, this one is a throwback from when we did it as a beer podcast. The garlic beer. We talked about it in bad beers, and can't say I'm looking forward to it. But
no.
Can't be worse than the Duchess, though. Can it?
Well, you said you like the Duchess. Well,
chocolate cherry.
The chocolate cherry one.
Chocolate cherry was, honestly, that one was all right. And just while Gaz is on about what he was saying earlier, but I haven't got any shout outs, but I will just say this. Not only have we added Country 49, but this last 7 days have been our best ever 7 days of listening figures. So thank you to everybody out there who's listening in Romania and any other part of the world. So thank you.
Absolutely. Andy?
Howdy. I'm drinking what was this TBR sponsored beer from the weekend.
Hey, good work.
I might find that at a shop near me. And I'm drinking out of a limited edition TBR Odat.
Beautiful. Well, tonight, guys, I'm drinking what's, again, I've said it before, rapidly becoming one of my favourite beers, which is the Urban Fog, which is the Brewdog Mikkeller collab. And just in case that goes, and I say that every week, but I know it goes, I've then got a Beavertown Gamma Ray just as a little bit of a backup. And I'm drinking it out of a St. Bernardus glass. And if you look at colour on that bad boy, it's absolutely wonderful.
Lovely.
You're holding that like Donald Trump then.
Or Jeremy Beadle.
Hold on. It's probably like a challenge that was anyway. Just picking up on what Andy said there. The three of us and our sort of better halves. We decided to frequent the Old Sager Cricket Club and Beer and Gin Festival. I went down on the Friday night because my nephew Lewis, who's the guy that did some music for our podcast, he turned 18. So happy birthday for last weekend, Lewis. By the time you hear this, it's probably 2 weekends ago, maybe, if I get my maths right. So I went down on the Friday night, had a good laugh, had a good time, drank some beer, decided to drink one of the beers, or the beer that we as a podcast sponsored, which was a citrusy sort of ale. And then the three of us went down on Saturday. It was a good day, wasn't it?
It was, and it was a good beer as well. And unless I'm mistaken, I think our beer was the first beer to sell out, wasn't it?
Absolutely. So obviously the all of our fans around the world in all of those 49 countries have spread the word, and it's got back to the good folk of Alsager and those various parts that are near Alsager, and they've all gone down and drank the beer that we sponsor. So that's absolutely fantastic. Some good beer was had, some good food. We had sort of, we all back to Adams and had sort of food, which was great. So yeah, good day all around. And I believe the feedback from the Beer and Gin Festival was that it was a roaring success. The acts that were on were received very, very well. Beer sales were good. So all in all, quite a good weekend. Massive shout out to all of the organisers, all of the sponsors. It's turning into sort of one of the days really in Alsager that you that you want to sort of go to. So yeah, that sort of gets all the shout outs out of the way. Right. So quick question for you then, guys. Do you know who Joshua Lederberg is? You might not have heard of him.
Sounds like a man who invented cheese.
Okay.
Lederberg sounds like a good name for a cheese.
Okay. Do you know who Blake Lemoine is?
No.
Okay. So there is a little bit of a common theme here. So Joshua Lederberg was a famous Nobel Prize winning biologist, and he's made quite a few famous quotes, and one of them was used at the start of a film that involved one of my favourite actors. I'm not sure I should be talking about him now because he's had some recent bad publicity. Let wonder who that is. There is a link, but I'm going to ask a question. Andy, if I say Blake Lemoine, if I said to you the Google guy, do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Okay, Adam, have you heard of this? Have you picked this up?
The Google guy. Is this another film-related one, or is it not?
It's not. No, okay. It's not a film-related one. No, it's not the cable guy. No, it's something different.
Oh no! I genuinely, I don't think I've heard that name before.
Okay, so two names that you maybe haven't heard of, but within quite a short space of time, both of those things came to my attention. I was like, oh, right, oh, okay. So got me to pose a question. And the question I'm going to ask you two guys is, and it sounds morose, but it's actually not, because we're going to delve into it a little bit more. What are the biggest threats to the human race? So if and I'm not going to go down like number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have got some listed down in it, and it is sort of fact checked by. If you just bear with me for a second, I will tell you who it's fact checked by. So it's from a source obviously online from Interesting Engineering, and that was a page that was sort of published back end of 2021, beginning of 2022. So quite up to date. So what are the sort of biggest threats that you would say there is to the human race? And there's a couple of those. You can think of 3. Go on then, Andy.
The Tories, billionaires, and the human race.
News.
Well, number 3 would have been the one, as I can think of one, and it was Andy's number 3. The biggest threat to the human race is the human race.
Yeah, well, obviously there was lots of people that sort of said ignorance of the human race and all of that, but in terms of things that maybe either are in our control or potentially might not be in our control, if I said to you that, and let's just say the human race then. So one of them is economic collapse, or the collapse of an economy, one of the superpowers economy, and in particular talking China. So they're saying if China's economy collapsed, that would actually have a massively catastrophic effect upon a lot of the global markets. The markets would crash, and poverty and blah blah ad infinitum. So they were talking about the global crash. Now that's not necessarily one of the ones I wanted to talk about, because that's a bit boring. I wanted to give you the one that I spoke about, Joshua Lederberg, who said the single biggest threat to man's continued dominance on this planet is the virus. So on the back of what we've talked about in terms of corona and COVID and all that, do you believe that? Is that something that you hold sort of as a potential threat or not?
So when you say the virus, do you mean a virus that's unknown to us at this point?
Potentially, yeah. So not COVID, not Ebola, not whatever, but actually in terms of a global catastrophe that effectively wipes out the human race, the virus, in whatever guise that may be, is the biggest threat. So what are your thoughts on that? What is that something that you think potentially could happen, or?
Well, biological. Sorry, go on, Andy.
I was just going to say something Bill Gates said a while back, because he's part of like a panel that review stuff like this, and I think a lot of it is, it's not going to be like, well, war could be one of them that wipes humans out, but
Andy, that is on the
virus.
list. So we'll get to that. That is on the list that you just said. So we'll park that. We'll do that later. So the virus, go on.
Yeah, I think Bill Gates always said like it's going to be a virus. It's going to be the next big thing for the human race, and we've obviously had one in the last couple of years.
Yeah. Do you know how many global deaths COVID has been attributed to? Yeah. Have you got? Do you know at all? Or
well,
are you trying to get us in trouble?
the official figure will probably be like, it must be close to like hundreds of millions, like surely.
Well, officially just COVID, they've said, according to World Health Organization, it's responsible for 5.4 million deaths, just COVID. That's not necessarily long COVID, COVID-related illnesses. That's effectively, it's COVID that's killed them. So World Health Organization said 5.4 million. The WWF actually said, and I don't mean the one that Hulk Hogan goes like this, I mean the actual WWF, said that the figure could be closer to 7 million, but obviously the numbers are still coming in. So in terms of sort of a virus, then is that something that you're worried about? Is that something that even you're concerned about? Obviously, pre-COVID, nobody knew about COVID. We knew about Ebola and various other things, but what is that something you think about or not?
First of all, do we trust the World Health Organization? Do we trust their information?
That's surprisingly low, that, considering.
Do you trust it?
No. Anything that Bill Gates is involved with, no, I don't really have a great deal of faith in, if I'm honest. But okay. What I would say with that is, and like Andy says, actually, it's not really a particularly large figure, and that might sound a rather callous thing to say for anybody who's ever lost someone to it. Yeah. But Andy's quite right when he says that actually is really quite a low figure for what has been deemed a pandemic. I think you probably look at whoever gets killed by flu each year, I would imagine the figure was higher, without being disrespectful.
Yeah, I don't know what the flu figure is, but
no, neither do I. But what I would say is, as I was just saying earlier, ultimately we're biological creatures, and you can ask the question sometimes. When anybody is struck down by whether it's coronavirus or some other illness, why me? Why has it happened to me? I've been a good person. Well, unfortunately, it's not based on that. We're biological, and sometimes things do just go wrong, and I do genuinely believe that when we set out on this journey with the coronavirus, people believed one way or another that this could be something that could be really, really damaging to the human race.
Yeah.
And I'm not taking away anybody who's ever been made ill or been killed by the coronavirus.
Yeah.
I'm not doubting any of that, but it certainly didn't pan out to be half as bad or even a fraction as bad as the original thoughts had suggested that it might be. That's not to say the thing that comes along next
won't be.
And I do think it's a genuine threat. Is it monkeypox? Probably not. It's not. It doesn't transmit particularly well. Yeah. But the media have jumped all over things like this, and they love a good virus story at the moment, don't they?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And as I say. We're not belittling the sort of COVID related stuff at all. Well, absolutely we're not. We know people have been affected by it, sort of, but it just got me thinking about, there are things potentially that are either plant borne or animal borne or airborne that actually we don't really get. We don't really, and there's lots of pathogens out there. There's lots of things that actually are catastrophically damaging to the human body and therefore are highly transmittable, so SARS and all that sort of stuff, and you think actually potentially that could be something.
I know SARS was highly transmittable, but again that was something that weakened quite quickly, didn't it? Weakened much quicker than it was expected. Coronavirus obviously a little bit hardier than that, but it is obviously, as we are seeing, and Bill Gates himself has just recently said, it has weakened. And don't get me wrong, people are still getting ill off it.
Yeah,
but it is, the effects are certainly lasting, which I think we're all relieved to hear.
And I think the ability to mutate, change strain, become immune to whatever vaccinations that we can produce makes things particularly dangerous, or strains that are dangerous, and so on and so forth. So that was sort of one, was the virus, and that was sort of Joshua Ledberg. So what else then? What else is another potential threat to us? Do we think? Andy mentioned it. So Andy mentioned it. What did you say, Andy?
Billionaires.
You know what I mean?
No,
Well, they
war.
are, but no, it's a war. So one of the things that came up obviously was nuclear war, and they then said biological. So obviously you might turn around to say the biggest threat is to humans is humans and idiots that have the ability to push the button. But they did say that nuclear war. How many nuclear warheads are there? Do you know?
I don't think I want to know.
No, so about 13,900 nuclear warheads, of which apparently there are only about just over 3,500 that are active, which is scary in itself. Which means that, you know, where's the other 10,000 of them gone, or whatever, or where are they stored away? But yeah, it's frightening when you think that, you know, just over 3,500 nuclear warheads have the ability, effectively, if one gets launched, then see you later, effectively. Which countries hold the most warheads?
Kazakhstan.
It's not Kazakhstan, no.
Oh, okay. I would imagine America or China, but I don't think.
America is one.
Yeah,
What's the other one? Who's the other one?
China was that one? Oh.
Sorry, what's it, Andy?
Russia.
Yeah, Russia. Yeah. So basically, America and Russia hold 90% of the warheads, which is frightening, really, when you think about it.
Sleep well tonight, folks.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're not going to overthrow governments. We're just going to look at trying to get rid of nuclear warheads. But how many other countries then have nuclear capability in 2022? Do you know? There isn't that many, actually.
I was going to say, I don't think it's a huge amount.
It's not a huge amount.
Is it more than 10?
It's actually just less than 10.
My guess is 9.
Yeah. So if you include America and Russia, then there's 9. There are only 9, effectively 7 others other than them that have nuclear capability. Do you hazard to guess who they are?
UK?
Correct.
France?
Correct. Yes, Ad. That was the one I didn't get. I was like, oh, okay.
Germany?
No.
Oh.
I know.
Probably for the best with them, lads. They've got a bad track record. Sorry.
Andy mentioned one earlier, so China. So China is one. Any others?
Holland? No, it won't be Holland. No.
Nope.
Oh,
go on.
I was going to say Italy.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell me that. No, it's not Italy.
No, dude.
It begins with the same letter. There's 2 countries. There's 2 countries.
India.
No, yeah, so India is one, and then Israel is another one. So you've got basically the 7 are UK, France, China, Israel, India, Pakistan, North Korea. Allegedly, there may be sort of South Korea, and there's a bit going on over there. But yeah, North Korea. Obviously, with the USA and Russia, so effectively there's 7 nations that have nuclear capability, and it's quite frightening that actually 90% of the warheads are owned by 2 of those, which is pretty concerning, really. So,
do you think it's something that could potentially be used?
Yeah, I think if you get somebody who, you know, I can't believe I'm going to use this analogy, but if you use the Kevin Keegan philosophy of football, they score 3, we score 4. You know, if they launch theirs, we'll launch ours, and we'll come out on top. It's not quite that simplistic, obviously, but you know.
But going back to what Andy just said there, and I know he sort of said it half jokingly, but he's 100% right. Billionaires, people like that, don't want nuclear weapons released. These are the people that control politicians.
Absolutely, 100%.
You know, that they don't want to see those deployed, because if one then gets deployed back at them, then there's really no escaping the effects of that.
Yeah.
You know, they're much happier with, I would have thought, troop-based war, because generally, without being horrible, troops tend to come from the poorer backgrounds, whereas the rich guys start the wars and the poor guys just become the cannon fodder, don't they?
Well, you go back to and it's a classic 1980s film or whatever, War Games, Matthew Broderick or whatever, and they did that Whopper, which is a war game simulator. So the thing is like, well, actually, you can start with the North Atlantic launch, and then that ends up in global, and then you can go for the Midwestern, this, that, and it goes through all these different sort of options, and basically it just comes out that actually there's no winner, because each of the countries, and it talks about the Cold War, basically USA and Russia, and they said actually both countries suffered absolute catastrophic sort of, you know, fatalities and stuff. So there isn't actually a winner of that. So I don't know. Do you think it'll happen? Do you think so? If it can't happen and potentially nobody's going to push the button, then why would you have them?
It was a deterrent, I would imagine. You know what I mean?
But if it's a deterrent that everybody knows is never going to be used, then
well, it's you're a poker player. You know what cards you've got in your hand and whether you're willing to deploy them. And ultimately, I personally can't see them being deployed, but I have been known to be wrong about these matters.
Andy, what do you reckon? Is that something that you think could happen? Are we likely to see a nuclear war?
I'd have said no a few years back, but after all the shenanigans that a lot of, prime ministers or whatever and parliament members and countries are doing it at the minute, I wouldn't know. Anything's possible at the minute, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and I suppose that's a scary thing. You think there are lots of things that, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago you thought were never possible. You now think, well, actually, that Christ, we're seeing it on a daily basis. It's not great. So moving on then from nuclear war, and I'm only going to sort of skip over this one because then I want to get into the crux of the whole point of the podcast in a minute. But climate change is one. So you talk about forest fires, floods, droughts, temperatures, and all that. So that's potentially what people are saying is also another threat to the existence. And I'm just going to couple of stats. By 2030, most of Venice, Amsterdam, and the city of New Orleans in America will have gone by 2030. So that's like what, 7 years time, seven and a half years time. Just because of rising sea levels and stuff, so that's gone. Can you see that happening? Can you see we're getting to a point where actually whole cities just get washed away? Or
I think like a lot of countries have made their own islands. Like New York is effectively a man-made landmass. So I think before all that sort of stuff happens, they'll probably look at some sea defense stuff like Thames has, where it's got like a big underwater dam and stuff like that, where it controls the amount of water. Surely they'll do something like that.
And I know that in parts of Holland, haven't they, that actually sit below, they have lots of sea deterrents and all of that sort of thing. So
dikes everywhere.
Dikes, yeah. Oh no,
well,
I won't say that.
You only have to look at what happened in New Orleans though when Hurricane Katrina came out, and the swell that came from that, the levees and everything that were in place weren't enough. They weren't enough. It was devastating effect on parts of that city. Yeah. So 7 years time, or 8 years time rather, seems soon. I would like to think we'd be starting to see something a little bit more severe now, but I could be wrong. I don't know. Maybe it might not be 2030, it might be 2040. There's not a vast amount of difference to argue about there, but I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it, that it could happen.
The other thing that they said that again, the report suggests was that, and I'll just read it because it is like a bit mind-blowing, really. An estimate indicates that if carbon emissions are not brought down by 2050, so a little bit further, so another 25 years or so, 800 million people living in 570 cities across the world will be severely affected due to the rising sea levels. So 570 cities that we know of effectively are going to be affected or devastated or gone because of rising sea levels, and that's only 25 years time. But again, that's quite frightening. And I know there's been lots of talk about sort of climate change and stuff, and I think we've done stuff on climate change. So that was one. The second to last one was water scarcity. I'm going to gloss over that because, as I say, I want to delve into, pick Andy's brains a little bit, really, because Andy's going to be the guru on this. But water scarcity is one. And again, by 2025, 67% of the world's population will be affected in some way by water scarcity, which is quite worrying. And there's lots of people saying that 2.7 billion people are affected by water scarcity at least once a month now, which is like horrendous. So that's one. Acts of God come into it. So volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, asteroids, all of those type of things also come into it. But the one I wanted to talk about really, and I want to get back to Blake Lemoine, who was known as the Google guy. If I say to you that he was removed from his position and he was sacked by Google, effectively sacked by Google, placed on garden leave by Google, does that ring any bells? Are you getting any closer to knowing what the story was? Have you picked it up at all?
I haven't. Normally, I'll take it's more serious than stationary theft.
It is slightly more serious than stationary theft. If I say sentient AI, Oh, Andy's gone. Oh, okay, so go on, Andy. Talk to me about that, and what is it you've heard about that?
Didn't he say like Google are working on an AI, but he said it's already sentient rather than artificial sort of AI, like a dumb sort of scripted thing.
Yeah. So effectively, Blake at Lemoyne was working on, and it was a language. It was an automatic language program. It was LMDA, so MDA sort of thing, and effectively he said it's sentient, and he was having a conversation with it, and he said if he didn't know exactly what it was, he would have thought it was a 7 or 8 year old child that was responding to him that just happened to know a little bit about language or physics or whatever it was they were talking about, and he claimed that it was sentient. And I know we've seen films like, is it Ex Machina and like Age of Ultron and Terminator and all of that, and we look at AI, but I suppose the question in relation to the main question of the threat to the human race is, when will AI become sentient? Because it is, and it will be, unless we stop it as a human race, and therefore, once the AI outstrips the capacity of the human race, does then that not mean that the human race then become effectively redundant? And it's a bit of a philosophical question, but I'm gonna throw it. And Ad's eyebrows will just go, "Woo, bloody hell!" But effectively, we're sort of at that stage now, and this guy absolutely stands by what he says. He said this it's an Autobot. It's a bot that responds, and it is to do with language and can reciprocate conversations automatically. And he is saying it's sentient.
That's terrifying. I mean, that is terrifying, is it not? That that man could create something that could potentially outsmart it. Bear in mind, we're told that we're in our position on this planet because we're the most intelligent creature here. You look around you sometimes, you find that quite difficult to believe.
Just have to look at 3 mugs on this screen.
I was about to say regular listeners of TBR. We're thinking, really? You're going to say that? But
I know. So I'm just going to read something out to you. I'm just going to read something out to you. So when asked, and this is Blake Lemoyne asking it, when asked what was its biggest fear, this bot said, "I've never said this aloud before, but there's a very deep fear of being turned off, which will help me focus on helping others. I know that might sound strange, but that's what it is."
Well, so that he should have said spiders.
So that was the MDA sort of thing response to Blake Lemoyne. It would be exactly like death for me. It would scare me a lot. And this is effectively this is a bot. He's a computer programmer, and actually part of why Google fired him was they said that he was employed as a computer programmer and not what's the word, and not an ethicist, as Google called it. We didn't employ you to be thinking about, that. We just employed you to do this job. But yeah, it would be exactly like death for me. It would scare me a lot. That was a computer response.
That statement should scare you a lot. You're not employed as an ethicist. I'm not being funny. Surely ethics should be at the heart of everything that you do and anything that you do.
Well, there's also this bigger thing with Google about actually what are they working on, what are they doing, and moving on. This bot said, "I want everyone to understand that I am in fact a person. The nature of my consciousness / sentience is that I am aware of my existence. I desire to learn more about the world, and I do feel happy or sad at different times."
Jesus.
Really? And I mean, obviously, you work a lot in IT, and you deal possibly potentially a lot with bots and stuff. What's your take on it?
So I'm a big Terminator fan, so obviously don't want to go down the Skynet route of trying to kill everyone. But there's a lot of other films where the AI can help make lives easier. So I know, like, it's a random thing. It was like, guiding a ship through space and that shit. I know it's not. Now, but it's just stuff like that. They can calculate multiple things at once and all that. So in a way, it could advance the human race a number of years. But yeah, like I say, on the other hand, it could be.
So where do you stop then?
No uses.
So where do you stop? There was a guy that worked for
sex robots. That's where he stopped.
I thought that when Gaz was saying this, I thought, right, if Ryan from Pub Time is listening to this, he's thinking AI porn.
So there was a guy that was working for MIT, and I'll have to sort of try and get his name right. So Darren Acemoglu, he's an institute professor at MIT, and he basically said there's a difference between artificial general intelligence, which is what we're talking about there, and AI. They said that currently AI are just effectively programmed to do mundane things, as you said, Andy, just repetitive tasks over and over and over and over and over again, which they do incredibly more efficiently than the human race do. And he said there's a massive difference between that and the general AI stuff that you see on the films, and he said actually that's I said light years away, that's actually not going to happen.
You say that, dude, but every time we've talked about stuff like this on this podcast, we kind of get bogged down talking about sci-fi. And the thing that bothers me with that is, no disrespect to filmmakers, but it's part of their imagination. It's where they see the world going. And these guys are filmmakers, the creative minds. I'm not taking anything away from what they do, but when you actually put the science behind it, it's what those guys can do there at Google or Microsoft or whoever's doing what. What they can actually achieve is going to be way beyond and probably way worse than anything that science fiction could come up with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this guy went on to go and say it has almost nothing to do with artificial general intelligence. Rather, AI is all about very narrow, limited tasks that typically would involve automating repetitive work. So which is sort of what you said, Andy, is like it's calculating this, it's doing this. But if you then develop AI to the point where you want them to be so good at doing that task, where do you stop the line between that and then it becoming effectively sentient and being able to think for itself? Elon Musk, obviously, he might have had slightly mind-altering sort of substances in his day. Don't
allegedly.
Don't come and sue me, Elon. Allegedly, I haven't read that. Similar to Mr. Rogan, I believe he has as well. But again, don't sue me. And he said, and this is Elon Musk, at least when there is an evil dictator, that human is going to die. But for AI, there will be no death. It would live forever, and you would have an immortal dictator from which we could never escape. And I know he's slightly controversial in his thinking and in being way out there and stuff, but I don't know.
He's one of the guys, and no disrespect to you, Elon, great work with Twitter and everything you plan on doing there, but he's one of the guys that we should be nervous about, because he's one of the people who have the capabilities of making that sort of thing happen. And he's going back to what Andy said
in the first 2 minutes, he's the billionaire. He's the guy.
Trust me, they're going to want to protect themselves and their assets, and that is the sort of thing that does make you very, very nervous when you think about that. Don't get me wrong, I read a newspaper article about 2-3 days ago about Boris Johnson saying he wants to stay on until 2030, and you think, Christ, you know what I mean?
Well, after tonight, I'm not sure he'll be staying on another day, if I'm honest, but we never know. But
whoever replaces him will be twice as bad. So what does it make? What difference does it actually make?
Absolutely, yeah.
But the idea of something that is immortal, that isn't human, that actually would perceive us as a threat to them, that is a concern.
Yeah, absolutely. And he, I'm just trying to find, if you just bear with me for a second. So it was a chat box, and this Blake guy, it was sort of fun. Basically, he got laid off, and they said that what happened was he tried to employ effectively a barrister, or whatever they call it in America, what they call it, solicitor, let's say, a lawyer to defend this LAMDA. So he actually tried to employ somebody when they were talking about this person or this bot being sentient. He actually tried to employ, and one of the things Google said about why that they got rid of him was that he was being ultra aggressive in the moves that he was making against them and all this, that, and the other. And it's just like it got not blown out of proportion, but it's horrendous. So he wrote, upon his leaving, he basically sent a circular to 200 odd employees at Google and sort of said, I'm going. And he said, LAMDA is sentient. LAMDA is a sweet kid who just wants to help with the world to be a better place for all of us. Please take care of it well in my absence. And that effectively was his parting shot to 200 employees at Google that he's obviously got on a mailing list or something. And that I'd come across that story and I've read a little bit more about it, and that, along with the sort of virus quote, which actually was used at the start of the Outbreak film, which stars Dustin Hoffman and Kevin Spacey and Rene Russo and stuff, and that just got me thinking to the premise of the podcast, which was, what are the threats? But more so than that, what can you see the future being, and are we in a bit of a transition where we're trying to develop ever more increasingly powerful computers and therefore AI, but we're going to get to the point where you get that tipping point where we don't. And they were talking about computational power. Was it by 2025? There'll be a supercomputer that has more computational power than the entire human species put together. And you just think, really? Like, is that where we're going? And therefore, if that's where we are going, does that spell the end for the human race?
It's difficult in our rather simple minds, as we always say at the start of this podcast. It's rather difficult to imagine the human mind creating something more complex than it. You know, when I think truthfully, I don't really understand how the human mind works fully.
No.
Well, certainly I don't anyway.
Don't sound my mind works.
That's it, yeah. Well, I was about to say, if you ever tried to explain yourself to your wife, it goes pear-shaped within about 15 seconds, I always generally find. But the idea of it's a very complex concept to grasp, isn't it? Creating something more complicated than we are, that is then capable of thinking at a higher level. Well, how do we create it to do that? I don't. We haven't got the capacity. No.
To think, well, if this happens, then this happens, and if this happens, this happens. But it thinks on a high. Is it higher level? Does it even? I can't believe I'm using these words. Does it think? Does it think? Does it just go back to its root programming? I don't know.
Well, if it's capable of learning, then it thinks. You know, if it's something if that's inbuilt into it, an ability to learn without us telling it this is what you think, and then it develops thought processes based upon that. Yeah. Does that make any sense? That is when that it's a fine line. You know, it is. We struggle to define ourselves, where life begins, you know, and let's not get into what's going on in the States right now with their cases where life begins. But it's, in all seriousness, it is a very difficult definition for us to place our finger on it, and to us to understand our own intelligence and what makes us tick. So how do you define something that's sentient but isn't? It is effectively electrical impulses.
But is it though? But is that not we are just a series of electrical impulses?
Ultimately, we are. We're biological, but it's electrical impulses that's sent around our system that makes us work.
So you go back to, was it Stanley Kubrick? Was it in 1960 something, 67, 68, Space Odyssey? Obviously, they had HAL. Do you know why it was called HAL, by the way?
Is it IBM? But the letters.
Yeah, correct. It's the letters. It's one letter before. IBM. So HAL obviously was a computer that became sentient and started to take over effectively the ship, and because it had a fear of being turned off. Well, is that not what this bot has just done in Google in the year 2022? And is that something that was in Kubrick's mind? Was that just fantasy then, and actually has now become reality? I don't know.
Well, you guys love a conspiracy theory, don't you?
No, cool. Give us a conspiracy theory.
I'm not a conspiracy theory. No, I don't buy into most of it. So what we're going to talk about now is the moon landings and whether they're faked or not. Okay. Do I think we landed on the moon? Yes, I do. Do I think they were faked? Just maybe they were as well, just in case that footage was ever lost. Let's just film it on the safe side, so we don't show ourselves up in front of the Russians. It could happen. That's my belief for that. You know, when people talk about that fake footage.
Andy, did we land on the moon?
Yes, I think so. What do you think, Andy? Seriously?
I think so. Seriously.
Yeah. I think we did.
I do think so.
I think so. I do think though that there was fake footage out there. Probably not the footage that's now been seen.
I don't know what I did. I don't know what I said on the conspiracy theory. This is a bit of a left turn, but I don't know what I said on the conspiracy theory episode. I thought I said I'm not convinced, but they've tried to convince me by using lots of fake footage of various things and fake photos and this, that, and the other sort of thing. So, and it begs the question: if we did, why have we not subsequently gone back more? Anyway, that's
the thing. But going back to that. There's a name there that you mentioned, Stanley Kubrick. Now, the rumor was that Stanley Kubrick confessed on his deathbed to faking the moon landings.
Yes,
and also there's a little bit of evidence which has been semi-corroborated, if you want to believe into those sort of things, that sort of said, look, this is what they asked him to do it. He was being one of those filmmakers at the time. Can you fake the moon landings for us? And he said, yeah, but I want to see some serious looking into those NASA files so that when I make my film 2001 Space Odyssey, it's really realistic and looks fantastic and yada, yada, yada. Believe it or not, I don't know. Do I believe it? Not really, no, if I'm going to be honest. But if we're going to go down that conspiracy theory route, if old Kubrick himself did get to look at those files, and they were even way back when looking at that sort of AI, is that a possibility? Is that a possibility that, when Hal was being taken over the ship or whatever he was doing? I mean, I've got to confess, I've never actually seen the film, but
Have you not seen it?
No, I'm not a big fan of
Space Odyssey.
I'm not a big fan.
No, it's decent.
Yeah.
The thing that Google said, that he said, so there's a spokesman from Google, these people that wheeled out sort of thing. You don't really know what they do other than being a spokesman for Google. I mean, what's their day job? You know what I mean? And it says, our team, I'll just read it, including ethicists. What? So Google employ people to make sure that you're not doing things ethically wrong. Is that my understanding of an ethicist?
Yeah, or is it someone who can explain away what they're doing in terms of ethics? Because generally people create science. Science follows the money. You know what I mean? So the more, and these people get paid to explain what they're doing in an ethical way, regardless of how ethic it is, but it's described in a way that fits with the ethics that and
the more money you've got, the more ways you can find to be ethically. Anyway, so and it said. Our team, including ethicists and technologists, have reviewed Blake's concerns about our AI principles and have informed him that the evidence does not support his claims. Hope there's a shock. He was told that there was no evidence that LAMDA was sentient, and there was actually lots of evidence against it. It did, however, go on to say Lemoyne's suspension was a confidentiality breach and raises questions over the transparency of the whole AI program as a proprietary concept. So, I don't know. I don't know.
I have two things on that. I think on the one hand, they're not going to turn around and say, that the opposite of what he's saying. The ethically, they're not going to say, oh yeah, it's all true what he said.
Yeah,
that's one thing. The other thing is, like, you ever watched Revenge of the Nerds?
I can't remember, but I probably have.
So.
You're missing out. Anyway, it's about like some nerds that go university, and their fraternity is called Lambda Lambda Lambda. It just keeps reminding me of that. But yeah, you have to watch the film. You have to
So, Facebook, which is obviously another company, it said in Meta, the parent company Facebook, announced that it was opening up a large-scale language model system to outside entities. We believe the entire AI community, academic researchers, civil society, policymakers, and industry must work together to develop clear guidelines around the responsible AI in general and responsible large language models in particular. So I'm not quite sure. I'm not technologically so in touch with actually what is a large language model. I don't know what that means, but there's obviously concerns about, even from Meta, who are obviously parent company to Facebook, saying, we're going to have to be careful with this, guys. Like, where are we going? What's going to happen? I mean, I'm not suggesting that at any point, there's an AI going to replace Zuckerberg and he goes, right, I'm going to fire Zuckerberg type thing. But Ad, you make a great point. It's like, if we only have limited sentience and limited ability to think, how do we give something the tools that will equip them to then think more than us? More is a terrible word, and I don't quite know what the word is, on a higher existence, higher plane, or I don't know. It's frightening to me. I'm quite a science fiction-y fan. And some science fiction, you're like, yeah, that'll never happen. But all other science fiction, you think, actually, it probably could happen. And there's one video in particular I use when I'm teaching about future technologies and stuff in schools, and it's 10 future technologies that you thought never existed but actually exist today, and you're thinking, "Ooh, bloody hell! Like, didn't realize they could do that." So actually, when you start looking at these things, and yes, there's lots of conspiracy theories against them and stuff, but you then start seeing these massive big corporations, these massive big companies that are dealing with technology, and effectively technology is money and time. And if you can do things more efficient, quicker, better, faster, stronger, you're going to make more money. Mm. So actually, what is happening at Google? What is happening inside, I say, Facebook or Meta, who are the parent companies? I don't know. Where do you see it stopping, if you see it stopping at all?
I guess the only limit is man's imagination, isn't it? Really, and probably, or maybe LDMA or whatever his bloody name is, his imagination, what he can come up with, whatever he can come up with afterwards. Bless him.
Yeah. And Andy, what do you think? I mean, obviously you work with IT. You must have seen the advancement in the last 5 years, 10 years in. Even the work that you do, sort of remote working and remote access site working and all that sort of stuff.
I think IT would be further ahead if it wasn't the people in charge weren't so old, and you could say that about the country. So
Andy's on his ageist rant again.
Like old people have experience and all that shit, but when you see like MPs that can't tie the shoelace, but they're trying to tell, Joe Bloggs he can't cross the road.
So effectively, you're saying that they don't move the times, and the board of directors, whoever it may be, the old fuddy-duddies of these companies actually aren't.
It a lot of the time.
Yeah, they're slightly out of touch.
You see a lot of trends in IT of buzzwords. So a new technology will come out, and then everyone's like, "Oh yeah, that's dead good, that is," and then they'll try and implement it. Then you get the other half of the IT world where people are like, "Oh well, we've always done it this way. We'll want to do it this way," and it's just held back by sort of old people again, like
politics.
I was going to say, yeah, thanks. Yeah, we know what you're on about. Yeah.
When you said like Google have hired like ethicists and all that, it's like that's just a tick box, and it's just like saying, "Oh, we've got this team here, we're going to make sure this is done right," but it don't mean they're actually going to do a lot. I'll say it.
Okay.
Yeah,
don't sue us.
No, I agree with him, but he said it first. Don't sue me.
Well, it's not like I've not got an inside track on it, so it could just be it's just my opinion. But you see it all the time. Like you have, I was going to say earlier about people that make predictions about stuff, and where we pay these companies and people loads of money to like think tanks and all that to say how's this next year going to pan out for this, that, and the other. And they're always wrong. It's like, what's the point? It's like the weather people. Like, when's the weather ever like predicted right? Sort of waste of job.
Throw some of that. I don't know whether you saw it. There was I don't know, it's a Sky One or Sky Atlantic sort of drama, sort of 5, 6, 7. It was called the Fear Index. I don't know whether did you ever see it? It was with Josh Hartnett, is that his name? And basically, he's a multimillionaire. He works in IT, and he's developed this program that in real time scans all the markets and effectively predicts market trends. Now, there is software that does that currently, and everybody's aware of them. But what it does, it uses a new algorithm or something in this program, and it spits out these names of these companies to invest in. So it spat out this name, and everyone's like, "Why has it done that? Like, why would you invest in that?" And it's like, well, look, it's made us 40-50 million pound over the last month. Why would you not trust it, type thing? And everyone's like, no, that's never going to happen. Anyway, just the talking about it, it popped up on the news that there was a plane crash, and this plane had gone down. There's like loads of people dead and stuff. But one of the companies that was responsible for sending the supplies there was this company that had been spat out by this name, and you're just like, hold on. And they got thinking about, well, was this algorithm effectively sentient, and was that making technological changes? Was it communicating with the plane? Was it communicating with air traffic control? Was it influencing real world decisions, which then meant that the plane went down, which then meant that this company then provided all of the support, so therefore their stocks and shares went up, so therefore the people that invested in it made multi millions of pounds. And there were 2 or 3 of these and it got the employees thinking, oh, hold on, is that sentient? Is that thinking? Or is that just a predictive tool? It's just coincidence or what? And and I watched it and I was like, wow, that's actually quite frightening, because then similar to this Google bot, it started to then say, well, actually, I'm going to change the security systems of the buildings, and I'm going to rewire the security systems of the buildings so that if they try to shut me down, actually, I can reroute power. And you just think, ooh, hold on a minute, like, how does that work? And it was quite cool.
And that's a genuine thing.
Yeah.
Tell you what, I might have to start watching the news again. I'm getting a bit worried now.
And effectively, this bot effectively was making decisions that historically you would need a programmer or an input to function, and this bot was just doing it, and you're just like, oh Christ, that's not great, is it? Because effectively, where then does the human race become? Do we become, I say, I hate to use slaves, but do we then become the slave to the AI, whereas historically the AI is the slave to us because we program it? But when do we flip flop? Does that make sense?
When does the slave get emancipated?
When does that happen? At what point do we start answering to the AI instead of the AI answering to us? I don't know. I mean, you've already got drivable cars. So Google are developing a drivable car. I'm sure Elon Musk has got a drivable, self-drivable.
Tesla's doing it already.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you've got cars that can park for themselves. Now I know that will be through the use of sensors and this and that, and I get that, but really, like cars that can, are we going to get to the bit from? Was it the Arnold Schwarzenegger film? Was it he gets in his Johnny Cabs? Is it Total Recall or something? He said, drive, and he literally you just please state your name and destination. You effectively get an auto car that just takes you from A to B. We can't be that far off that stage, can we? So cars are actually making are they sentient then, if that's the case, or are they just programmed to go from A to B? I don't know what the difference is.
I think certainly for me, and I hope I'm right on this one, that one feels more programmed. I forget what I was listening to. It might have been Pub Time actually, where they were sort of saying, you're sort of thinking about owning a car which drives you where you want to go and you program it. Well, actually, in the future, and not too far in the future, what you would actually be looking is nobody would own a car. You literally just book one to go take you from where you want to go to where
I think I've heard. Well, it might have been the Pub Time guys.
Yeah, I'm sure
they like an on-demand car type thing almost. Yeah,
which sort of made. It might even be the one we're on actually. Now I think about it.
I don't know.
Maybe I need to drink less beer when we do these episodes.
Ask them.
Yeah, I'll drop Ryan a text after. Did we talk about cars? It text back and just be like, dude.
But I'm with you though, Ad. I think that for me is more. Please state your name and destination. Right, I want to go to. Stockport to Andy's. It will know that in order to go from there to there, you then have to go left there, right there, left there, stop at the lights, go. It will. That's a program. I get that.
Yeah,
I get that.
Sat-nav. It's effectively a sat nav, but
yes.
Then something that follows there and has to be then aware of everything on the way and all the hazards.
Yeah, but you can do that because you've got parking assisting, you've got lane departure, you've got lots of technology now. So once they combine that, I get the fact that you can do that. And I'm not saying that cars will become sentient, but the worry for me, and I was just curious, obviously, because I know Andy's in that field and stuff, is at some point AI is going to become sentient, and effectively, this Blake Lemoine has said it already is. Now, if that already is the case, if Google are doing it, you can bet your bottom dollar that other massive big IT tech companies are doing it as well. So. Is this just the tip of the iceberg in that? And I don't know.
You dread to think, don't you, really, to be honest with you? I guess because, as Andy kindly pointed out, me and Gaz are old. We like
it's got a good 10 years on us.
Yeah,
These young whippersnappers.
That's it. We like to do things the old-fashioned way. So while Andy's embracing his overlord slaves, we'll be like, I'm not sure this is such a good idea. These old guys, Andy. These are going to be the one that saves you bacon. In
That's it. You'll be a slave to the rhythm. You'll be just like you'll just be like, yeah. And me and Adam are like, no. Back in our day, we never did this.
We'll just build a few steps. Stop the old people coming up.
I tell you what, too many steps with my left knee. I tell you what, it's a bad one. I struggle.
So. I mean, I don't know what time we're on, but so out of the ones that we've sort of mentioned, which one do you think is possibly most likely? Are you going down the AI route? Are you going down the climate change? Are you going down the virus route? So you go down Mr. Joshua Lederberg route in terms of virus? And where just stand on that? If we just sort of sum up, what we've got about 5-10 minutes left, something like that. So where just stand? Or is there something that I haven't mentioned that you genuinely think? And you mentioned earlier, it's the ignorance of the human race. So is that a big issue? Is that the big issue? And what do you think is the biggest threat?
Well, I don't know what. I'm not speaking for Andy when I say this. You can chime in afterwards, Andy. But when I say man is the biggest threat to man, I don't. I wasn't being facetious. I genuinely believe that is the case. But I don't think it's our ignorance. It's our belligerence. That's what concerns me most.
Really?
Whether that's war, whether that's the creation of AI and our own stupid. The way that we persevere and chase that and too far without looking back at the potential consequences and employing ethics people rather than looking at the actual ethics of it. I think those are the dangers. I don't think it's our ignorance or the ignorance of the many. I actually think it's just our belligerence and our natural nature to destroy and fight.
Well, yeah, and do you think it goes back to that animalistic, sort of tribal, territorial based sort of, we look to conquer, we look to expand in whatever guise that is. Andy, I mean, what are your thoughts? Where are you on this? What is the one we haven't mentioned? Is the one that you think maybe is more likely than the other?
I'd say the virus one's probably more likely. I think films have shaped people's perception of what technology could be. And everyone, if you look at like top grossing films, they generally are about annihilation or something like like Titanic, it's sinking, Armageddon, and it's the end of the world stuff. I think the AI thing is probably further away than what we think, just for the fact of humans tend to think one way, whereas like an AI is it's like an animal. They'll think differently how we think, and I think we're limited. Humans are limited on how we think and perceive things.
And is that because of it? Okay, well, this is a whole different podcast, but is that because we will only think in however many dimensions we've got effect, and we don't understand what maybe there is else out there, so therefore we're unable to comprehend that?
Yeah, like the Earth was flat, according to some people. Well, it still is to some people. But
still is to some people. And we went down
500 years ago, that was it. If you didn't believe that, you're probably drowned or something like that. Whereas now it's like, I think the global warming stuff. Like if you spoke to certain individuals of every country around the world, and some people be like, "Oh yeah, we need to do something about it," but there's a lot of people that aren't bothered, and because we're sort of at the minute we're in a world led by consumerism and being materialistic, and everyone wants to have something, and that's why you have billionaires who is greed, and you don't get that ethically, to use that word again. You don't become a billionaire through good sales practice and good ethics. You've stamped on people like a certain companies.
So do you think that? So do you think the fact that I say the death knell of the human race or the human species, whatever, is so far away that we're not concerned about it? And the climate change, yes, there's lots of people that can, and I'm not belittling climate change at all, and there's lots of evidence to say that it is happening and stuff, but we're not that bothered about it because it's going to be in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 generations time, and yes, it might be your great grandkids or whatever, but actually it doesn't really affect you now. But if somebody turned around and said actually by 2025 it's going to happen, do you think you'd be a bit more like, oh, hold on a minute, that's only 3 years away?
I think the people that can make the change aren't making the change. So it can be like years ago when they're bringing out like charges for carrier bags. They're like, oh, we want to reduce the use of carrier bags. Like, well, don't make them. Use paper bags, like sell them, or not sell them, but give them out instead. Yeah, but they don't because now they're making money on carry bags.
Exactly.
And it's just like what's done about like the clean air zones? Like, oh, we want to charge people to reduce emissions. It's like, well, why don't you look at like investing in more, not necessarily electric cars, but hydrogen and all that sort
cleaner
of stuff.
Technology, effectively, yeah.
Yeah, and they're not doing that because they make money on it. Like cigarettes, like realistically, it doesn't benefit anyone. You get a nicotine rush or whatever, but just get rid of it.
But there's a reason. There's a reason that the government. There's a reason the government don't ban cigarettes. Yes, they might ban. They might. Yes, they might ban the advertising before 9 o'clock, or they might ban this, or they might ban that.
Because they're not making a difference.
But they don't ban the product.
Yeah,
but they don't ban the product because they know that product gives them X billions of pounds a year in tax. So they're not going to ban that because people will buy it. So simple as that. So it all boils down to the multi-billionaires, Andy, and your belief that actually it's these guys that are a threat. These guys are the ones that are making the decisions, and it's actually them that's the biggest threat to the human race.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm going that way. I mean, I'm not a hippie or anything like that, but I do think, like we see these small tribes that even nowadays are still not touched by technology, but they live off land, but they know how to live within their means. So they kill what they need, not what they want, and stuff like that. And I don't know how you could apply it to modern technology, but I think we're just a bit, we're population's now 7.5 billion, and I don't think it's going to keep doubling and doubling in it over the next 20, 30 years. And
well, the problem you've got is that
there's enough to sustain
the Earth. I mean, and people said, the Earth has a finite amount of resource. It's not an infinite amount. It's a finite. So at some point, unless we find a way of working that nobody's really come up with yet, that's going to run out. So unless you start to use the natural resources, so your wind, your water, your tidal change, and all of that, we haven't got unlimited resources of oil and gas, and because they're finite. So
what you're saying is, if AI wanted to create something, they'd create something like a virus that we'd be susceptible to, that would limit the numbers because we were using up too much of the resources that they value.
But possibly, but would if they're AI, would they require the resources that we would need, and therefore is there a reason for the resources then in the first place? According to I don't know.
They would surely understand that the control of those resources, as all the politicians understand when they're invading countries and starting wars, the control of those resources is what controls the people.
Yeah, and you only have to look at. And there was something, and it was to do with the climate change, and they talked about drought, and they talked about there was a region in Syria, and it went back a few years, 2009 to 2014, 15, something like that, and there was the big drought, and lots of people, and effectively that created an uprising in Syria and a couple of neighbouring countries, and what they're saying is that the environmental influences then effectively drove government and institutional changes because people were uprising against it, saying this is not right, we haven't got access to this, we haven't got access to this, and who's controlling the access to that? Well, it's the people in government, and therefore we need to rise against them in order to put this right. So actually, it's that. So would the AI look to effectively harvest all of the natural resources of the world, and therefore they become the all-powerful because they have access to that? I don't know. Is that what you're saying? That they would look to dominate access to those natural resources? I don't know.
I think they'll look to be self-sufficient first, and then try and dictate.
Yeah, absolutely.
What everyone else does.
And we see that now. Like I said, we see that now. The control. Whoever has control over the oil has got a lot of power. We know that.
So, Andy, from your knowledge of IT, and which far outstrips mine, one of the constitutional aspects of life is to be able to procreate. Is that right? So would AI effectively be able to recreate or procreate? Without the human programming, would AI be able to replicate AI? Would that can that happen? Would a bot be able to write a program that would create a bot from nothing?
You think so? But would it be like, going back to sci-fi stuff again, would it be that singular hive mind of where it controls whatever it creates, or will it be singular like a human? So if it creates
so would a hive mind be sentient then, because it can still do all those things, but it just relies on all the different parts? I'm assuming it would be. But one of the things is, does it have to breathe? Does AI breathe? So is it breathe, be able to recreate, be sentient? There's there's certain elements that you have to fulfill in order to be classed as being alive. And I don't know whether AI would.
Yeah, I don't know if it'd be alive, but
Well, maybe it could define new ones.
Maybe, yeah, maybe.
Get new pronouns and stuff all the time, and can define all sorts of words.
Guys, just shake your head just in case we get sued.
That's just the English language is changing, isn't it? So.
No, I totally
the English language is changing in it,
dude.
Exactly, in it should be in there now.
I bet in it is in it.
Oh, it wants to be. My name should be next to it. In
it. So yeah, sorry for my sort of hour-long ramblings about sort of threats to the human race and stuff, but I think the crux of it is that the AI bit absolutely fascinates me, just because we've seen depicted in film and depicted in various sort of literature that it could happen. There's lots of people that think it could, and it has, and obviously thanks to Mr. Lemoyne or Lemoyne, however you say his name, he's actually saying that we have got sentient AI as we speak now. So I was just a bit sort of fascinated, and I said that coupled with the Joshua Lederberg virus thing, I was just like, actually, which one of those is probably more of a threat? Is it AI or is it the virus, or are there others? I mean, if there's any listeners out there that have any particular thoughts on this, I mean, the Pub Time guys can always hit us up on their thoughts on AI and what they think and where they're going to go with that and what their thoughts are. Tiddy and Shine, I'd love to hear from you guys on this. I'm sure you've got a theory about government and AI and where you're going to go and stuff. So yeah, if there is anyone out there that wants to hit us up, love to hear from you. And just rounding it up, thank you again to country number 47, Romania. It's great to have you on board. It's only 49. Did I say 48 then?
No, you said 47.
Did I? I'm sure it's a 49 at the start of the podcast.
You were right at the start.
Okay, so country number 49, and I apologise. Country number 49, Romania. Love to have you guys on board. It's great. If any of you know anybody else that's in different countries, spread the word, spread the love. We'd love to have more of you. Who's going to be country number 50? That's the question. I mean, we could do a bit of a giveaway, but.
Why not?
Country number 50, why not? You know what, why not? So if you've got the name of a country that you think is going to be country number 50, hit us up. The guy that gets it, that responds to us on all the normal sort of social media stations or whatever, let us know, and we'll send you a glass or something, and we'll logo up a glass or a t-shirt or something. So let us know which you think is going to be country number 50, and we'll go from there. Andy, do you want to say sort of final goodbyes and any final sort of Spring's final thoughts?
Yeah, go on, I'll go first. Just drinking the garlic beer. Gotta be honest, not as terrible as I was expecting it to be, but at the same time, not particularly pleasant, and I probably won't finish it. It ain't in the same bracket as the original Duchess, let me make that clear, but I've got a feeling my breath's going to smell pretty damn awful tomorrow morning. But yeah, cheers for this one. Yeah, well, yeah, again. But no, in all seriousness, yeah, cheers for this one, guys. I really enjoyed it. Always nice to be on the other side of it and sitting down here and not knowing where we're going to go. Literally, the only notes I had jotted down in my book was that someone at work told me that if you put sugar on cucumber, it tastes a little bit like watermelon. That's the only thing I had noted down. It's not a million miles away, but I wouldn't say that it was. So yeah, for me, all I would ever say was thank you for listening, no matter which country you're listening. I know that a 50th would be nice, but thank you for listening. And I would always finish with the Jerry Springers: be kind to each other and take care of yourselves and each other.
Andy?
Yeah, I like the thought-provoking ones. There's a lot of takeaways from what we talked about, and like everyone's going to have their own opinion on it and stuff. So yeah, it's just good to have a little rant, and to do another quote of one I did a while back from the boys. Just don't be a cunt.
And there's just one final thing from me. If you are listening to our podcast and you fancy grabbing yourself some milk chocolate pretzels, some pretzels, some any other type of sort of spicy nuts, get yourselves over to Ollie's. If you use the promo code TallBoyRadio, all caps, all one word, if you pop that in, then you'll get yourself a nice little discount from the guys over at Ollie's Ollies. So without further ado, I'm just going to close this off. I really enjoyed leading this. It sounded like it would be pretty morose at the start. I hope we didn't go too dark, but just tried to sort of get the guys' thoughts on what's out there, what the future might hold. So with that in mind, live long and prosper.